World War I, also known as the Great War, was a global conflict that shaped the course of the 20th century. This cataclysmic event, ignited by a spark in the Balkans, spread rapidly, engulfing nations in its fiery grip. From the fields of France to the shores of Gallipoli, the conflict left its indelible mark on every corner of the globe. It was a war that saw empires crumble and new nations rise. Understanding this conflict is crucial to comprehending the world as we know it today. The causes of World War I were complex and multifaceted. Indeed, the war was not the result of a single event, but a series of interconnected factors. First, let's look at nationalism and imperialism. Nationalism, a strong feeling of pride in and devotion to one's country, was sweeping across Europe. This pride often led to a desire for expansion, or imperialism, as countries sought to strengthen their power and influence. However, these ambitions often clashed, igniting tensions between nations. Simultaneously, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in June of 1914 provided the spark that would ignite the powder keg of Europe. His death at the hands of a Serbian nationalist group known as the Black Hand was the immediate cause that led to the outbreak of the war. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, setting off a chain reaction across Europe. This reaction was fueled by a complex system of alliances. In an attempt to maintain a balance of power, European nations had formed alliances promising to aid each other in the event of a conflict. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Russia mobilized to defend its Slavic brethren, drawing in Germany, France, and eventually, the whole world. In this way, nationalism, imperialism, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and a complex system of alliances intertwined, creating a web of tension that would eventually snap, leading to the outbreak of World War I. These factors set the stage for a conflict of unprecedented scale. The war officially began with Germany's invasion of Belgium in August 1914. The German war plan, known as the Schlieffen Plan, called for a rapid strike through neutral Belgium to outflank the French army. The goal was to quickly capture Paris and knock France out of the war before Russia could fully mobilize its forces. However, the invasion of Belgium, a neutral country, was a violation of international law. It shocked the world and drove many previously neutral nations to reconsider their stance. Among them was Britain, who had signed a treaty guaranteeing Belgium's neutrality more than 75 years earlier. Britain issued an ultimatum to Germany to withdraw from Belgium, but Germany ignored it. And so, on August 4th, Britain declared war on Germany. Meanwhile, Russia, allied with France and Britain, was also mobilizing its vast army. The Russian bear was awoken, ready to defend its Slavic brothers in Serbia and to uphold its commitments to its allies. The Tsar's soldiers began marching towards the German and Austro-Hungarian borders. The dominoes had begun to fall. The complex network of alliances, treaties, and rivalries that had kept an uneasy peace for decades was now propelling the continent towards a catastrophic conflict. The great powers were drawn in, one, by a combination of honor, fear, and ambition. Within weeks, the major powers of Europe were at war. The war quickly descended into a stalemate along the Western Front. As the armies dug in, a network of trenches snaked its way from the North Sea to the Swiss border, a scar on the face of Europe. Life within these trenches was far from easy. Soldiers endured muddy, wet conditions, biting cold in the winter, sweltering heat in the summer, and the constant threat of enemy fire. Amidst the mud and the rats, the stench of death hung heavy in the air. The Western Front was not just a physical battlefield, but a psychological one too. The stalemate led to a war of attrition, each side hoping to wear the other down. Days of monotony would be shattered by intense bursts of violence, artillery barrages followed by infantry charges across no man's land, a deadly stretch of territory scarred by shell craters and tangled barbed wire. Yet, even in this grim landscape, innovation thrived. The war saw the introduction of new technologies and tactics. Tanks rumbled across the battlefield for the first time, and the skies became a new front with the advent of military aircraft. Chemical weapons, particularly mustard gas, added a terrifying new dimension to the conflict. The realities of trench warfare brought a new level of brutality to the conflict. It was a grinding, relentless form of warfare that tested the physical and mental resilience of all who experienced it, forever changing our understanding of what war could be. Several major battles defined the course of the war. The Battle of the Somme, fought in the summer and autumn of 1916, was one of the largest battles on the Western Front. It was intended to break the deadlock and relieve the French, who were being hammered at Verdun. However, the first day of the Somme was the bloodiest in British military history, with almost 60,000 casualties. Meanwhile, the Battle of Verdun, fought from February to December in 1916, was intended by the Germans to bleed the French white. It became a symbol of French determination and self-sacrifice. The 9-month battle cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers on both sides, making Verdun one of the most devastating battles of the war. Finally, the Battle of Passchendaele, also known as the Third Battle of Ypres, took place in the summer and autumn of 1917. It was a battle fought in terrible conditions, with torrential rain turning the battlefield into a quagmire. The battle is remembered not only for the scale of casualties, but also for the mud. These battles were not just about gaining territory or strategic advantage. They were about endurance, about the ability to keep going in the face of unimaginable horror. They were a test of the human spirit, a testament to the courage and resilience of the men who fought in them. These battles were some of the deadliest in human history. In 1917, the United States entered the war. Germany had resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, a bold move that threatened American ships and international neutrality. This aggressive strategy, under the Kaiser's command, saw submarines attacking any vessel within the war zone without warning, a clear violation of international law. One such attack led to the sinking of the British ocean liner, the Lusitania. More than 1,000 passengers lost their lives, including 128 Americans. This tragic incident sent shockwaves across the Atlantic, deeply touching the American public and pushing the nation towards war. In response, on April 2, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. His poignant words, "The world must be made safe for democracy," resonated with many. 4 days later, the declaration was approved, and America joined the Allies on the battlefields of Europe. The entry of the United States marked a turning point in the war. Meanwhile, in Russia, a revolution was underway. The country was in turmoil, gripped by war fatigue and social unrest. Among the chaos, a radical political faction was gaining momentum, the Bolsheviks. Led by Vladimir Lenin, they advocated for a government run by workers and peasants, a stark contrast to Russia's autocratic monarchy. Amidst growing pressure, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate in March of 1917, ending more than 3 centuries of Romanov rule. A provisional government took power, but it struggled to maintain control and was eventually overthrown by the Bolsheviks in what is known as the October Revolution. With the Bolsheviks in power, Russia withdrew from the war to focus on internal affairs, signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in March of 1918. This marked Russia's official exit from World War I. The Russian Revolution marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. The war officially ended with an armistice on the Western Front on November 11, 1918. The guns fell silent, and the world held its breath, hoping that this global conflict had finally come to a close. As the dust settled, the leaders of the world's powers convened in a small palace just outside Paris. Their mission? To carve out a new world order from the ashes of the old. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, became the cornerstone of this new era. But the treaty was not without controversy. It contained a provision known as the War Guilt Clause, which placed the blame for the war squarely on Germany and Austria-Hungary. This clause required these nations to accept responsibility for causing the war and to pay reparations to the Allies for the damage inflicted during the conflict. However, many argued that the War Guilt Clause was too harsh, sowing seeds of resentment and bitterness in Germany and Austria-Hungary. Critics feared that these feelings could potentially fuel future conflicts. And as history would later show, they were not entirely wrong. The Treaty of Versailles and the War Guilt Clause were not just about ending a war. They were about shaping a new world order, one that would hopefully prevent such a devastating conflict from happening again. But as we all know, the road to peace is often fraught with unforeseen challenges. The peace treaty set the stage for future conflicts. World War I was a global conflict that changed the world. It was a clash of nationalism, imperialism, and complex alliances. This war introduced us to the horrors of trench warfare, major battles like the Somme, Verdun, and Passchendaele. The USA's entry and Russia's revolution reshaped the political landscape. The armistice and the Treaty of Versailles brought a controversial end, leaving wounds that festered. World War I was a historical turning point. Its legacy continues to shape international relations and global politics to this day.